The career of Aubrey Guy began with 6 years at WMC Memphis, and then World War II came calling. After leaving the war and the Army at the rank of captain, Aubrey returned to WMC, working at both radio and TV. But the travel bug and the broadcasting bug both bit Aubrey. Over the years, he would travel to Korea as a news correspondent, as well as Israel and other foreign countries. Aubrey Guy finally enjoyed his well-earned retirement from WMPS beginning in 1978. After almost 50 years serving his country and his broadcast, the community now welcomes Aubrey Guy to the Tennessee Radio Hall of Fame. Bill Haney began his radio career in 1955. A few short years later, Bill became part owner of WKBJ. He became the first to broadcast statewide basketball tournaments. But that wasn't enough. He co-founded the Tennessee Basketball State Network and then went on to begin the University of Tennessee at Martin Sports Network in 1978. Haney is credited with elevating the quality and contour of sports broadcasting not just in Tennessee, but all across the Southeast. He was a member of the TSSAA Hall of Fame and the Gibson County Sports Hall of Fame. And now Bill Haney takes his place in the Tennessee Radio Hall of Fame. Claude Tomlinson wasn't just a radio guy or radio announcer. Claude Tomlinson was a radio legend. When he was just a kid, Claude told his dad that he was going to be a radio announcer when he grew up. And boy, did he ever. For more than a generation, Claude Tomlinson's Great Day in the Morning show on WIVK was the top morning show in America, in all formats.
Everybody remembers that Claude kept a guitar at the radio station, and there weren't these large jingle conglomerates now that you could buy a jingle for your business. So if they were doing a commercial on WIVK that required a singing jingle, Claude would grab the guitar and he would write and produce that jingle right there on the spot and do it live into the commercial, and nobody thought anything about it. It was just accepted as the norm. He did these comedy voices where he'd have 3 people live with no pre-taping or anything like that. He'd have 3 distinct people. He'd have Claude, he'd have Old Man Schultz, he'd have Lester Longmire, and these 3 comedic voices would be actually arguing with each other as though they were all separate personalities, and everybody loved it. It sounded like a great morning team from today, but I'm talking about in the late 50s. It was Claude and his microphone and his imagination.
Claude the Cat Tomlinson retired after 38 years at WIVK in 1991 and now joins the Tennessee Radio Hall of Fame.
Started off like every other reporter at a newspaper, writing obituaries.
Oh, obituaries.
I was, and he called me in and he said, "How would you like to go to the sports department next week?" And I said, "Mr. Knight, I really don't think I want to go. I'm really enjoying what I'm doing, and it's getting me closer and closer, I think, to my goal." And he said, "Well, I'll tell you what I'm going to do. If you go to the sports department next week, the following week, we're going to make our sports editor. He's going to become sports editor emeritus, and I'm going to name you sports editor, and here's what you're going to be making," which was significantly above the poverty wages I was making then. And I said, "Mr. Snyder, you got yourself a sports editor." I was heavily involved in the coverage of Martin Luther King's assassination. I was heavily involved in the coverage in Memphis of JFK's assassination. I had an unusual relationship with Muhammad Ali. I wrote a number of columns when he had his boxing license taken away, that it was unconstitutional. He finally got his license back, and he was fighting. His first fight was against Jerry Quarry in Atlanta, and I went to cover it. I went into the locker room after the fight, and he really cut up Quarry pretty good. And you couldn't get near Ali. But I saw Mrs. Clay sitting off in a corner by herself. And I went over and introduced myself to her. And she said, "Oh, you're that young man who's been writing those pieces about my son, saying that he should be allowed to fight." And I said, "How would you know that?" And she said, "I have a friend in Memphis who's been sending him to him." And she stood up, and there must have been 100 reporters around Ali. I couldn't get close. I was going to have to wait till I had more people cleared out. And she called him, and I never will forget this. She called him Cassius, even though he was Muhammad Ali.
Yeah,
and she called him Cassius, "Come over here." And he came, and she introduced him to me. I've been blessed, Jeff. I've had a wonderful career. I know I'm in the twilight of it now, and that's okay. I've got an illness that's probably going to get me, but I can't complain because I've had a wonderful career.
Gene Nobles joined WLAC in 1943, hosting the Midnight Special, just one of 3 programs he hosted on the station. Randy Wood, who owned Randy's Record Shop in Gallatin, parlayed sponsorship of that program into a successful mail order business and made it possible for him to establish the Dot record label. Gene was a native of Arkansas, but soon made Nashville his home and was also great at pushing the limits, assaulting his listeners with insults and double entendres. Nobles retired in 1972 and passed away in 1989.
Even as a young child, J. Karen Thomas was always destined for greatness. She started down that career path in radio, eventually landing at Y107 in Nashville. She not only had a great radio career, she was also very actively involved in the drama and theater communities. Karen did award-winning theater work in Atlanta and moved to Los Angeles and established herself as an accomplished actor with more than 40 guest starring roles, including Judging Amy, Army Wives, and Criminal Minds. She even landed a part in Star Wars: Knights of the Old Republic, appearing on numerous television shows and movies, even starring with Robin Williams in the 2014 film Boulevard. J. Karen was equally accomplished as a singer, performing around the world at Disney Sea in Tokyo and at the Cannes Film Festival. With a heart as big as her smile, J. Karen Thomas was also involved in numerous charities, always giving of herself to others and to her profession. Now welcome J. Karen Thomas to the Tennessee Radio Hall of Fame.
John Ward told me a story one time about going on vacation in the Bahamas. And he left the airport in a taxi, gave the taxi driver the address of the hotel. And the taxi driver said, "Hey, where are you from, man?" And John Ward said, "I'm from Knoxville, Tennessee." And the taxi driver said, "Oh, Preacher Mull, Preacher Mull." He said, "I have all Preacher Mull's gospel books, Preacher Mull's hymnals. Everybody listens to Preacher Mull on WWL in New Orleans." John Ward came back and he said, "I thought I was pretty famous." But he said taxi drivers in Jamaica and in this case, somewhere in the Caribbean, all know of Preacher Mull, but they never heard of John Ward.
Jay Basil was quite a man, and he would have been 92 this October had he lived. And what's amazing about me, to me, about Brother Mull was the fact that when he was 11 months old, he fell into an open fireplace and burned his head and he practically lost all his eyesight. He could make out a shadow of something, but he couldn't tell what it was.
Thanks for inducting a very good friend of ours, J. Basil Mull, into the Tennessee Radio Hall of Fame. I will never forget when Gloria and I first started writing songs. We would get in our car on Sunday night and tune in to WLAC to listen to J. Basil Mull, hoping that we could hear him play I've Been to Calvary by the Spear Family. one of the first songs that we ever wrote. He was a dear friend and helped get our music out to a lot of people.
To say he was consumed with radio is an understatement. He fell in love with radio before I was born. So growing up, radio was always a part of my life. The focus and heart and soul of radio, the most important single thing in radio, was the listener. If the listener was happy, the listener would stay, and all the rest would come. Also, another consumption he had was his own source of a radio survey. It was called Find a Bunch of Parked Cars, and yes indeed, he'd be pressing his face to the window of every car he could find. And as a child, and even some of his friends, we were all in horror that someone would think we were getting ready to break in the car. But he wanted to know what station that radio was programmed to. And the greatest compliment he could ever give anyone was when he would say, "You done good." It would be, "Yo, Butch, you done good." Or, "You done good, Jeff. You done good." And that always meant the world to anyone who received that compliment. With that, I would like to thank the Tennessee Radio Hall of Fame for giving my dad, Pete Neininger, this wonderful legacy award. And I also would like to say, hey, Mr. Pete, you done good. Thank you.
W.A. Wilson was the man responsible for the very first radio station in the tri-state area. As a former chief telegraph operator for the Western Union, Wilson planned, formatted, and signed on WOPI in 1929. He passed along the dedication to his radio career to his son Jim. Jim worked with his dad for several years. They signed on WOPI-FM in 1946 and operated the two until 1959. For signing on the first radio station between Roanoke, Virginia and Knoxville, his footprint will be forever felt throughout the Appalachians. We are proud to welcome W.A. Wilson to the Tennessee Radio Hall of Fame.
Little did I realize when I met that handsome, dark-haired man with a voice that could make my heart skip a beat, I would be sitting here more than 3 decades later without him by my side. It seems as if everything Woody and I did was accomplished together. We were a team. It's not that we were inseparable, but the fact is we learned early in our relationship that we both wanted the same things in life: to help others and be a part of our community. I can vividly remember him teaching me how to operate the broadcast console at WSMT. Here I was, a hometown Sparta gal who had never seen the inside of a radio station studio, much less learning how to control the dials that would make my voice reach out to thousands of listeners in the area. Sometimes we worked 7 days a week just to accomplish what Woody had always drilled into my head. We are doing this for the people of this community, he would say. This is our obligation, to keep them entertained and informed. And for many years, that is exactly what we did. From spinning the records to announcing the news to live remote broadcasts, Woody was there, with me by his side to help out in any way possible. There were benefits and pageants to be emceed, as well as community events that required the special touch that could only be provided by the transplanted Yankee from Indiana. I'm still not sure how to define my life without him. But what I do know is this: God has been good to me beyond measure. He was there for Woody and me through every step of our journey together. Thank you, God, for giving us 30 years of life together.